This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to Carvana. Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
The views expressed on this podcast are those of the participants, not of Reuters News.
Cette clarification, pour moi, elle est urgente. Et il y a un lieu pour cette clarification, une institution, c'est le Parlement. Dans un débat ordonné, suivi d'un vote, et non pas dans le désordre des affrontements de rue et des injures.
That was French Prime Minister François Bayrou speaking on August 25th, saying he was seeking a clarification, an urgent clarification, and he was hoping to get that through debate, followed by a vote. He did not want a confrontation on the streets. So that's what we're here to talk about, France's simmering political crisis, which is threatening to boil over once again, with potentially significant consequences for the Eurozone's second largest economy and its debt. Uncertainty is nothing new in France. Emmanuel Macron's government has faced a relentless charge from Marine Le Pen and her far-right National Rally Party. The question now looming over French politics is who will succeed Macron after 2027.
That's right, we're going to get another key milestone in the longest running saga on the continent, which is what will happen in French parliamentary mathematics. Like, is this going to work out? As you said, François Bayrou has tried and apparently failed to get pushed through a budget. He's hoping that a vote will give him a mandate to do, well, what every European leader has sought a mandate for since basically 2008, which is push through austerity measures, push through reforms, try and tackle a budget deficit and persistently rising debt. Can the country find a way out of its political and financial impasse? And what are the consequences for the Eurozone if it can't? That is the subject of this week's Viewsroom. It's Jonathan.
And it's Amy. And it's The Viewsroom, the weekly podcast that delves into the knottiest issues in economics, business, and corporate finance.
Right. And this one really is a knotty issue, right? Because beyond the proximate problem here, which is France has a difficult fiscal situation that it's trying to get into order, and doing so runs through a lot of political live wires. It's also part of this sort of weird global right-wing sort of fraternity that you see, you know, say an Elon Musk or a J.D. Vance in the US kind of occasionally take these potshots in from the side in support of, you know, insurgent candidates like Le Pen and kind of criticizing what they see or claim to see as a sort of, you know, generally restrictive policy environment on all the things that conservatives prize, and generally liberal policy environment on all the things that they hate, which is to say basically kind of immigration, expansive social welfare states, value-added taxes, and so on. I mean, for Europe, though, it's kind of a more existential thing beyond this kind of like political rancor and point scoring, right?
It is. And I was sort of curious, Jonathan, you know how sometimes these European stories can sort of make their way to the US? They sort of get into the consciousness of, you know, obviously the Eurozone crisis and things like that. Is France and what's going on, is that something that people talk about in the US as like an issue? I mean, as we said, it's the second largest economy in Europe, and it is exactly kind of this vote next week, this no confidence vote is sort of, you know, it's a situation that many European governments find themselves in.
I think it comes to us through a bit of a funhouse mirror. So a lot of the actual import for local politics for the Eurozone and so on, I think gets lost a little bit. But it's definitely something that catches the eye of, you know, if you are an economist looking at what's happening to the sustainability of the fiscal state worldwide. The rising spread between, French and German government debt is one of those data points that goes alongside, for instance, rising gilt yields in the UK or kind of pretty severe currency moves worldwide. It is definitely something that people are thinking about, but it's also one of those things where it gets put through the kind of political viewpoint, kind of mangling machine. And the news kind of comes through in a bit of an oddball way, depending on whether you are, again, this kind of like globalist left winger or this kind of, xenophobic right wing kind of attitude that you bring to it.
So we have, luckily, a French man in our ranks, Pierre Briançon, who is looking very closely at the French situation. And just to confuse things, he is based in Berlin. So we have a European perspective, we'll say. And he is joined by Neil Unmack today, who is an associate editor and a debt expert at Breaking Views. So Neil, Pierre, you are very welcome to the Viewsroom.
Glad to be here.
So, Pierre, I suppose we should start with a history lesson. And I'm not suggesting we go back to Napoleon or anything, but can you explain to our listeners, as Jonathan said, I feel like this is a really long-running saga. We've been talking about France and political turmoil and, Emmanuel Macron last year calling the elections. So where do you think this all starts, just in terms of the situation France now finds itself in economically and politically?
Okay, let's not go back to Napoleon, but maybe let's go back to Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. Because France has not balanced a budget since 1974. In other words, Emmanuel Macron was not even born when France last balanced its budget. So we're talking a long habit of playing rather relaxed or loose with the fiscal discipline in general. The immediate cause of the current crisis is what you described, is that the prime minister decided that he could not go into a budgetary debate in Parliament without first asking Parliament to support his overall scheme, which is, say, 44 billion in spending in next year's budget, try to get the budget from more than 6% of GDP to a little less than 6% of GDP. We're not talking massive austerity there. But even that, in a context of a divided Parliament, itself created by Emmanuel Macron's stunning decision more than a year ago to call for snap elections he didn't really need, which led to a hung parliament and then the impossibility to form a government that actually can muster a majority. So he decided to ask for a vote of confidence to parliament, which according to the constitution means that if he loses, he has to resign. So the odds are that as of next Monday, France will have its third prime minister within 12 months, which is, even for France, kind of a lot. But you can also argue that part of the current mess is due to the very peculiar French political system, which is a mix between a presidential system and a parliamentary system, where the president cannot govern seriously without a parliamentary majority, but he has to appoint a prime minister who himself, so the president cannot be kicked out, but his prime minister can be kicked out by parliament. So we're in the mess. All of this because France, and we're talking short run here, since the end of COVID, or the post-COVID era, is the only country in the Eurozone that has not shrunk its debt load and tried to roll back on the massive fiscal stimulus that had to be agreed and which no one contests, had to be decided in 2020 and 2021.
Right, that's what I kind of wanted to run through here, because I think all of us were sat here a while ago. You mentioned the snap election that Macron called that was sort of came out of nowhere, was not anything that was forced by any kind of, just like mechanical thing in statute that was pushing him towards that. And now we are in this odd kind of limbo situation. I'm surprised to hear you say that France is the only Eurozone country that hasn't actually performed any kind of like fiscal consolidation since COVID. And I'm not sure whether that's just an issue of there's been so much paralysis in the government or not. But it generally, I think, especially from abroad, the loose schematic that people have in their mind of the Eurozone is Germany is all about fiscal consolidation and rectitude and high interest rates and fear about inflation. And France is all about trying to push it back on that, an expansive fiscal state, an expansive defense policy, an expansive kind of view of interventionist federal Europe. Does that really still hold, or is France now kind of trapped into a position where it is going to have to consolidate and pull back no matter what?
It is going to have to pull back. It is going to have to consolidate. What has changed in the situation you described is that Germany is no longer in a phase of fiscal consolidation. Quite the contrary. Germany is the only major country in Europe that goes for massive fiscal stimulus, and which is good, which they should do, because after years of fiscal tightening and fiscal austerity or fiscal discipline, they should do that. As for France, Macron's responsibility in the current situation is overwhelming. The reason for the fact that the deficit went way beyond the forecasts that were made a year and a half ago is because the lack of tax receipts due to Macron's unfunded tax cuts 2 years ago, and even the one that he decided during his first presidential term. Spending is holding. Spending is not going out of the. It's not way beyond estimates and forecasts. The tax receipts, if you combine Macron's tax cuts and lower growth than the government's always optimistic forecast, that's why you're in such a situation that creates a sense of drama, if you want, around the government.
I was just going to bring you in here, Neil, because all of this often comes back to essentially what does this all mean for the debt markets and borrowing. And Jonathan mentioned the UK and the gilt market, and that is obviously the thing that's hanging over the UK government at the moment, is like, basically, will debt levels continue to rise up? What are investors telling us about France and the sort of confidence they have in the economy and the sort of political situation?
Sure. Well, there's been a sort of a switcheroo in the debt markets. France was originally, or go back 5 years, France was part of what was called the semi-core, so the group of countries not quite as fiscally well regarded as Germany, but still one of the stronger countries. And then during the crisis, you had what were known as the peripheral countries: Spain, Italy, etc., Greece. And what's happened in the last sort of couple of years really is that a lot of the other countries have started to get their fiscal positions improved, and their cost of borrowing has come down, and France has not. And the key sort of indicator of that is the fact that the spread that France pays over Germany to borrow for 10 years is now very close to that Italy pays. And Italy was always seen as a much weaker, much more lower rated sovereign. So that change essentially means that one of the Eurozone's largest issuers of debt is essentially suffering, and its spreads are widening, and that probably is still a process that has some way to go. So France's debt shows no sign of shrinking right now. Unless that changes, its spread to Germany is likely to keep going up, and it will probably end up having to pay quite a lot more than Italy. And the question,
I'm so interested about this because it kind of oddly overlaps with the political valence here, right? You and Amy were just describing two relatively left of center governments that are both struggling under rising yields and kind of rising spreads versus a benchmark, the UK and France. And now you have kind of this center right to kind of like relatively far to the right kind of government in Italy, which is, I think, seen as a model or an ally for right-wing governments abroad who want to see change in Europe, where that spread is beginning to either tighten back in or at least holding relative to France. I mean, what do you think that is about? Is that just a pure political stability premium that's draining out of France and is pumping up in Italy? Is it something that's actually to do with policy?
Well, it's both, right? There is the political risk premium, and the French fiscal position is a lot worse than the Italian one, even though France has a lower starting debt level. But the actual trajectory over the next 5 years, Italy is expected to basically keep its debt level. French debt will keep rising and will rise, so it's much closer to where Italy is now. The question really is, if that spread widens a lot, when, what does that do? When does the ECB step in? And that's, I think at the moment, it's probably quite a long way from needing to. And it would be very difficult for the ECB to step in and actively support France. But if we see what we saw at the end... I was
going to say, sorry, just naively, are you talking about like another, whatever it takes moment?
Yeah.
No, the ECB... Oh. Sorry, go ahead.
Go, Pierre. Allez-y.
No, the ECB is not about to come to the rescue, even though France is currently benefiting from the ECB's overall mantle, if you want, of protection because of the arsenal that the ECB has built for itself in the last 10 years since the euro crisis. So yields are probably capped because there's the assumption that the ECB is there. But the ECB will not come to the rescue. The ECB does not have the instruments to come to the rescue of France unless France agrees to a much tougher austerity program that its government is ready to enact. Because there's a so-called transmission protection instrument that the ECB devised in 2022 to protect countries that have nothing to do with fiscal irresponsibility from the contagion of others who might damage their finances. The ECB is pretty clear that for the moment, there's absolutely no reason they should come to the rescue of France. They will not do that. They might, however, take care of the countries that might be affected through contagion if a really big hit happens on financial markets. But otherwise, France should not count on the ECB at all, because that would be they would be sorely disappointed if they did.
I mean, I think that's easy for the ECB. I think that's right on paper. But the point is that this is, the Eurozone's second largest economy. If we really see French spreads gap out, if we start to see French banks struggling to access the market or losing deposits, the ECB will have to do something. Whether it's aggressively cutting rates, whether it's pumping,
at the price of a severe austerity program. I don't see them doing that just for free, if you want, without a serious fiscal adjustment program.
And do you think they should? Do you think the ECB should be stepping in here, or do you think it is a reasonable thing at this point to wait?
Step in for now. I mean, the situation is not dramatic. I think the political calendar will see to it that the ECB doesn't, unless something happened in 2027 that might then we might enter a totally different world, if you want. But if France has a far right president or political chaos worsens even beyond the level we're currently seeing, but otherwise the ECB has no reason to do that. But as Neil said, I mean the big difference between France and Italy, which are, as he wrote, trading places nowadays, is that France is the second largest, not only economic power in Europe, but the political and strategic power. I mean, France is a key player in Europe's defense. France, not to mention the atomic, the nuclear bomb or these kind of things. But if the Eurozone gets into a situation where France is in permanent state of chaos, political and financial, then I think the whole of Europe will suffer greatly.
But it's funny, you talked about, Pierre, the situation with Germany and that they were unleashing this, stimulus, and that was a good thing because actually it will kind of kickstart the economy. France is doing, it seems to me, exactly the same playbook that European countries have been doing since the financial crisis, which doesn't revive growth, angers voters. We're kind of back to this no confidence vote is sort of like it's exactly that same playbook. Is there any scope for stimulus or growth? Is that so divorced from where they are right now, from where France is right now? Would that be another kind of Liz Truss UK moment if they attempted something like that, where it's like, oh God, no, the investors wouldn't be able to handle it?
I think stimulus is not on the agenda of anyone, not even the opposition politicians who will vote to censor the government next Monday. I think the question is how you turn around French finances. The far right and on the left have a different agenda, which is always the same old thing: soak the rich and keep the pensions as they are. Don't change anything to the pension system, and this kind of proposals we know lead absolutely nowhere. But on the other hand, what I worry about is the situation deteriorating without any form of action, whether stimulus or actually fiscal austerity, is that things are being left pretty much to drift.
Hey, Neil, I'm kind of curious about whether this analogizes to the rest of Europe, because Amy, I think your point there is really compelling. We have been in this doom loop, it feels like, just looking at Europe from afar for a long time. And it feels like it never gets anywhere further, and all of the mainstream political parties just end up seeing their positions eroded further and further and further, with, you know, some exceptions like Denmark or something like that. I mean, do you think like this paralysis is a European issue, that, you know, kind of everybody is doomed to follow the same path that France is walking down right now? Or do you see like meaningful differences between this and
Sure.
what's going on elsewhere?
Well, it's not in Germany, right? And it's not in Italy right now. So, and I think that's why the markets are relatively, you know, the big thing that the markets worry about is euro breakup risk, the risk that we'll see a country leave the eurozone, and that doesn't seem to be on the table even for Marine Le Pen right now. So that will keep, if that risk were to return in 2027 at the presidential elections, then that would really be the thing that would probably start to spook the markets.
And Pierre, what about next week, the no confidence vote? So what are the outcomes that could happen? So let's say he loses the no confidence vote. What happens from there?
He resigns, and Macron will appoint a new prime minister who will have pretty much face the same problems, have to deal with a deficit that is still at around 6% of GDP, which he has to take it down, he or she has to take down. Macron also has a weapon, but I'm not sure how he can really use it in the current context, that he can call snap elections again if he feels that the new election might end up with an actual majority in parliament. Whether the majority supports him or not is another question, but at least an operating majority. In the current context, this is unlikely. I mean, the Rassemblement National, the far right of Marine Le Pen, is polling at 32% of the vote. That's more than Macron's party and the mainstream conservative together, and they're divided, they don't agree, poll at around 25%. So in the current context, the Front National gets 1/3 of the votes. The French voting system is organized so that it is protected against wild gyration in public opinion. So they may be not getting 1/3 of the MPs, but they will be the dominant force in the next parliament if Macron calls the election. So I don't think he will do that. But I mean, he's been known to be unpredictable, a bit irresponsible, likes to play with fire. So he cannot even rule that out, really, as we saw last year when he decided to call those elections.
So, chaos and uncertainty awaits us yet again in France. Pierre, Neil, thank you so much for joining us on the Fuse Room.
Thank you. Merci.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was produced by Cheryl Pena in New York and Gregory Garner in Toronto. You can listen to a new episode of The Views Room every Thursday on the Reuters app or your favorite platform. And don't forget to tune into our sister podcast, The Big View, every Tuesday, as well as the other great podcasts from the Reuters team. If you like what you heard, please follow The Views Room and let us know what you thought. And check out our views on the biggest stories in business and finance every day at breakingviews.com and reuters.com.